Like the diary in the vent. 3 days later, Emily would stand in a police station with blood under her fingernails and a dead mayor locked in a storage unit behind her. But first, there was the diary. And the diary came first, 13 hours earlier. The vent was rattling again. 3 a.m. at the Blue Ridge Motor Lodge, and the vent in room 214 was doing that thing it always did. A metallic scraping that built and fell away like something alive trying to get out. Emily Carter stood on a plastic chair in her yellow cleaning gloves. Flathead screwdriver gripped tight, fluorescent light flickering overhead and casting long, sick shadows across the vacant room. The vending machine hummed outside in the hallway. Rain hammered the window in rhythmic sheets. The first screw popped free and clattered onto linoleum, then the second. Third? The metal screw was rust-stained, reluctant, and when she twisted the last one, the vent cover swung down on a single hinge with a sound like something being torn open. A puff of gray dust exploded outward. Emily sneezed, squinting into the darkness of the ductwork. And there, wedged against the galvanized steel ducting, wrapped in cobwebs, was a dark rectangular shape. Leather. Old. She reached up with both gloved hands and pulled. The book came free with a dull thud into her palm. It was heavy. Black leather, stiffened and stained with dark, brownish-red smears that looked like they'd been there for years. A brass padlock kept it sealed, and embossed in fading gold on the bottom corner, barely visible. Property of CV. Emily stepped down from the chair. She sat on the edge of the unmade bed and used the screwdriver tip to pry at the brass lock. The metal resisted, then gave way with a sharp crack. Brass fragments scattered across the beige motel duvet like shrapnel. The diary fell open to its first page. The handwriting was frantic, looping black ink that seemed to slash across the yellowed paper with violence. Emily's eyes caught the top line and froze there. June 12th. The Sterling boy didn't drown. They watched him go under. Her fingers trembled as she flipped forward through entries. The same looping script filled page after page. Dates and accusations. Names that made her stomach clench. And photographs. Polaroids slipped between the pages. She found one dated September 12th, 1994. Her father standing next to the town's mayor, both of them holding shovels in a dark field, earth turned black beneath their boots. Underneath, someone had written, "The Foundation." Emily sat very still. The rain continued its assault on the windows. The vending machine hummed. And in her shaking hands, the diary seemed to pulse with its own dark weight. She slipped it into her canvas tote bag, nestling it between a spare t-shirt and a toddler's toy. Toby's stuffed bear from home. Then she moved to the reception desk, sliding behind the bulletproof glass partition, her eyes darting to the CCTV monitor. The parking lot feed showed everything. Rain-slicked asphalt, the flickering neon of the no vacancy sign, puddles that caught and reflected light like small dark mirrors. She watched the monitor, tucking the bag beneath the desk. And that's when the black Cadillac Escalade appeared. It crawled through the lot with headlights off. The vehicle moved with a predatory, silent glide, tires disturbing water that had pooled on the pavement. Emily leaned forward, her nose nearly touching the monitor's glass, and the Escalade slowed. Stopped directly in front of the lobby. The driver's side window rolled down. Precisely 2 inches, a plume of cigar smoke billowed out into the wet night air like an offering to the rain. And in that darkness inside the car, Emily caught a flash of a gold ring on a hand gripping the steering wheel. Just a hand. Just enough to know someone was there. Someone was looking. The SUV accelerated suddenly. Tires screeched. It disappeared into the darkness of the lot. Emily's breath fogged the monitor's glass. She pulled the diary back out and opened to the rear cover. In the seam, folded small, was a Polaroid photograph. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. Her father, Arthur, standing beside the mayor in what looked like the same dark field, both of them holding shovels. And at the bottom, in handwriting, she recognized from her father's old workshop a single line. Arthur helped. Arthur buried. Arthur knows. Dad? Emily whispered. What did you do? The handwriting in the diary, the CV initials. They matched the old labels in her father's workshop, faded ink on wood. CV Clara Vance, the woman her father had been rumored to have an affair with. The woman who disappeared in 1994. The woman everyone said had just run off to the coast and never came back. Emily pulled the diary close to her chest. She could hear her own heartbeat filling her ears. The light from the motel sign flashed red, then blue, then red again across her face. She should have known. She should have known from the moment the lock opened. But knowledge and truth are different things. Truth takes time to settle. Truth hurts more when it arrives late. By 7:30 a.m., Emily was standing at a Shell station outside Asheville, pumping gas into her rusted Honda Civic. The diary lay on the passenger seat, and she couldn't stop looking at it. The leather seemed darker in daylight. The stains seemed deeper. She was so focused on the book that she didn't notice the shadow falling across her car until it was too late. A man in a tan work jacket blocked her path to the door. He moved fast, too fast. And before Emily could process what was happening, he'd grabbed her wrist and twisted. Pain exploded down her arm like lightning. The mayor wants his book, sweetheart, the man said, his voice gravelly, his breath stinking of stale tobacco. Hand it over. Emily drove her knee up hard. The man's grip loosened just enough, and she grabbed the metal squeegee from the water bucket next to the pump. She swung it across his face. Rubber and metal edge connecting with his eyes, leaving a trail of blue soapy water and blood. He staggered backward, hands flying to his face, and Emily dove into the driver's seat. The man recovered fast. His fist smashed through the driver's side window, spider-webbing the glass in a pattern like a gunshot. Emily threw the car into reverse. Tires screamed. Black rubber smoke rose from the asphalt as she zoomed backward, the man's distorted reflection multiplying in the fractured glass. She threw the car into drive and shot onto the main road. In the rearview mirror, the man stood in the middle of the gas station, blood dripping from his forehead, phone pressed to his ear. She could see his mouth moving. She could see him making the call. The broken window howled wind into the car. The diary sat on the passenger seat, innocent and terrible, stained now with a single drop of her own blood. Emily drove without thinking, her hands too tight on the wheel. She drove toward her apartment, toward Toby, toward the life she'd built on lies and circumstance. She drove toward what she didn't yet know would be her final mistake. The keys jingled like bells in her shaking hands at the apartment door. She pushed it open and saw Marcus sitting on her sofa, holding her 4-year-old son, Toby, close to his chest. Toby's stuffed bear was tucked under one arm. Marcus's other arm was draped across the boy's shoulders in a gesture that was almost fatherly. Almost. Marcus stood slowly, setting Toby down. He walked toward her, his boots thudding on the hardwood, and pulled a thick envelope from his pocket. He tossed it onto the kitchen table. It fanned out. Stacks of $100 bills, more money than Emily had seen in her entire life. Mayor Sterling says you found something of his, Marcus said, his voice oily and smooth in a way that made Emily's skin crawl. Give it to me, and we can be a family again at the beach house. All 3 of us. Like it was supposed to be. Emily backed away, her hand gripping the strap of her bag where the diary was hidden. She looked at Toby, who was playing with a toy truck. Brand new, expensive, a bribe wrapped in plastic and greed. A bruise was already purpling on her wrist from the gas station. Marcus's face hardened. He reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His thumb pressed hard into her cheek, and he leaned in close, his breath hot and rank on her face. "Don't be stupid, Em," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "They'll kill you. Then they'll give Toby to me, and I'll tell him you just left us." Again, Emily jerked her head away. She grabbed Toby's hand and pulled him toward the bathroom, locking the door behind them. She slid down to the white tile floor, her back against the door, as Marcus started pounding on the wood. Booming thuds that seemed to shake the hinges. She pulled Toby close and wrapped her arms around him, feeling him shake against her chest, feeling her entire world compress into a single, desperate moment. She didn't come out until he stopped pounding. Didn't come out until she heard him leave, his footsteps heavy and certain, the door slamming shut behind him. She waited for the sound of his truck engine. Then she waited longer, holding Toby, counting her heartbeats in the darkness of that small bathroom. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Emily was in the basement of the Asheville Public Library, cranking a heavy metal microfilm reader. The film whirred, images of old newspapers blurring past in a streak of gray and white. Her fingers were numb on the cold metal knob. The basement was dim, dusty, quiet, except for the clicking sound of the reel. She stopped the film and watched a headline bloom into focus. "Mayor celebrates new development." The photo showed a construction site from 1994. And in the background, barely visible, her father's work truck. The license plate was clear, ART 584. Her father's vanity plate, his initials, his pride. Emily cross-referenced the diary entry for that same date. Her hands moved between the journal and the microfilm screen like someone conducting an autopsy. The text in the diary read, "Arthur buried the girl's coat under the foundation of the Riverside Plaza. He can't look me in the eye." The handwriting matched. It matched her father's old letters perfectly. The same slope, the same pressure points, the same particular way he wrote the letter A with a flourish. It was him. It had always been him. She found a hidden pocket in the back of the diary. Inside was a receipt for a storage unit. Tunnel Road Storage, Unit 402, paid in full by A. Carter. The date was 1 month ago. 1 month. Her father had rented a storage unit a month before he died. A shadow fell across the library stacks. Emily looked up and saw a tall man in a suit watching her from across the rows of books. He wasn't a library patron. He had a radio earpiece. His eyes were cold and professional, and when he saw that she'd seen him, he started walking toward her, his pace steady and inevitable. Emily knocked over her chair and ran. The concrete of the parking garage ramp was cold beneath her sneakers as she sprinted upward, her lungs burning. Behind her came the heavy thud-thud of dress shoes echoing through the levels. A black sedan screeched around the corner above her, blocking her path forward. Emily didn't slow down. She leaped over the concrete barrier between levels and dropped 10 feet, landing hard on the roof of a parked SUV. The metal roof buckled beneath her with a loud boom that echoed through the garage. The two men reached the barrier. The lead one drew a pistol, a Glock 17, and aimed. He fired. The suppressed shot was soft, almost polite, but the bullet sparked off the SUV's luggage rack, inches from Emily's head. She scrambled under the vehicle and pulled a fire extinguisher from a nearby pillar. When the men ran down the stairs toward her level, she pulled the pin and blasted the white chemical foam into the air. The cloud exploded outward, blinding and choking, obscuring the headlights of the approaching sedan. Emily slipped through a personnel-only door and jammed a metal pipe through the handle just as the men slammed against it. She ran toward the exit, the diary clutched to her chest like armor, her footsteps echoing away from the pounding and shouting behind her. She didn't stop running. Not until she reached her car. Not until she was driving toward Tunnel Road, toward her father's secret, toward the final answer she didn't want but desperately needed. The corrugated metal door of Unit 402 screeched as Emily slid it upward. Inside, the unit was nearly empty, except for a large plastic trunk wrapped in silver duct tape, sitting alone in the center like an offering or a curse. The smell of mothballs and decay wafted out, filling her lungs. Emily sliced through the tape with her car keys. She flipped the lid. Inside was a collection of women's shoes, jewelry, rings and bracelets that caught the weak light filtering through the small window. And underneath it all, a blood-stained blue dress. At the bottom lay a heavy concrete moving hammer, the kind used for breaking foundations. And taped to the inside of the lid was a photograph of Clara Vance, her face frozen in a moment of innocence, smiling for a camera that had no idea it would be the last photograph ever taken of her. Emily found a small microcassette recorder. She pressed play. Her father's voice filled the storage unit, gravelly and tired. "The mayor paid for the silence, but I did the work. Clara is under the Riverside Plaza. I kept the trophies. I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry." The tape hissed and stopped. A shadow fell across the doorway. Emily looked up. It wasn't a thug. It wasn't one of the men from the parking garage. It was Mayor Sterling himself, standing alone in the storage unit entrance, holding a silenced pistol. He looked tired, not angry. Weary in a way that suggested he'd been carrying this weight for 30 years. "Your father was a monster, Emily," the mayor said, his voice soft and almost regretful. "I just managed him. Now, I have to manage you." Emily looked at the diary in her lap. She looked at the hammer in the trunk. She looked at the pistol in the mayor's steady hand, and she understood that there was no help coming. She was trapped in a metal box with the most powerful man in the city, and the only way out was violence. She threw the diary at the mayor's face. He flinched just enough, and Emily grabbed the hammer. She swung it upward in a wide arc, catching him in the ribs. There was a sickening crack, bone snapping or air leaving his lungs, she couldn't tell which. And the mayor staggered backward. He fired. The suppressed shot was a soft phut, almost apologetic, and the bullet grazed Emily's shoulder, tearing fabric and flesh. Searing pain exploded down her arm. She fell back against the plastic trunk, gasping. The mayor stepped forward, raising the pistol for a second shot, and Emily kicked the trunk toward his legs. He tripped, falling into the unit, and Emily scrambled onto his back. She dug her thumbs into his eyes while grabbing the hand holding the gun, feeling the heat of his body beneath her, the struggle of his muscles, the rank smell of his panic. The gun went off again. The bullet hit the metal ceiling. Emily slammed the mayor's head against the concrete floor. Once, twice, 3 times, until he went limp beneath her, until his body stopped resisting. She rolled off him, gasping, her hands coated in his blood and dust. She grabbed the gun and the diary. She stumbled out of the unit and pulled the door down, jamming a padlock through the handle from the outside. She was shivering, her blood dripping onto the asphalt, a trail of red leading away from her father's final confession. By 6 p.m., Emily was driving into the motel parking lot. Marcus was standing by the lobby door, his hand firmly on Toby's shoulder. Toby was crying. Marcus was holding a phone, watching a live news feed on the screen. The mayor's disappearance already breaking into the evening cycle, already becoming a story. Emily saw the blood on her own shirt. Marcus saw it too. He smiled, a cruel, jagged expression. and pulled a flick knife from his pocket. The blade caught the neon light. He held it near Toby's leg. "The Sterling guards are coming, Em," Marcus said, his voice like sandpaper. "They think you killed the mayor. Give me the book, and I'll tell them you went that way. I'll even keep the kid." Emily looked at the diary. Then she looked at her phone on the dashboard. She started an upload. Every photo of the diary, every page of the microcassette recording, every piece of evidence. She was sending it all to every news outlet in North Carolina. Her fingers moved across the screen, cold and certain, watching the progress bar climb. 50%, 75%, 90%. The thug vehicles entered the far end of the parking lot. SUVs with darkened windows, engines roaring closer through the rain. Emily stepped out of the car. She held the diary up. Her hand was steady now. She was trapped between her abuser and the killers, and she'd never felt more free. The upload finished. A green checkmark appeared. She threw the phone into the tall grass and looked at Marcus. She smiled. "It's already gone, Marcus," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Everyone knows, even your new friends." The lead thug jumped out of the SUV, but his tablet pinged. Emily watched his face pale as he read the news alert. The headlines were already spreading like fire. Mayor Sterling linked to 1994 disappearance. Unsolved murder case reopened. Federal investigation launches. The thug looked at his partner, then at Emily, then at Marcus standing alone with his knife. He knew. They all knew. The Sterling family was done. The game was over. These men were now targets of a federal investigation, and they weren't going to jail for a dead dynasty. The SUVs reversed and peeled out, tires screeching on wet asphalt, tail lights disappearing into the dark. Marcus was left standing alone, his knife still out. Toby shrinking away from him, pressing his small body against the vending machine. Emily walked toward Marcus. She pulled the silenced pistol from her waistband, the one she'd taken from the mayor. She pointed it directly at Marcus's chest. Her boots splashed through puddles. The rain fell harder. The motel sign pulsed red. Marcus dropped the knife. He held his hands up. He started to beg, his voice high and whining, words tumbling over each other. Toby ran to the side, hiding behind a vending machine, his small frame barely visible in the neon. Emily didn't fire. She looked at the knife in the puddle. She looked at Marcus's face, twisted with cowardice and fear. She realized she didn't need to be her father. She just needed Marcus gone. She struck him across the temple with the butt of the gun. Hard. The sound was a dull clunk of metal on bone. Marcus went down into the mud, unconscious, bleeding from a shallow cut above his eye. Emily picked up Toby and carried him into room 214. She washed her hands in the small sink. The water ran pink, then red, then clear. She looked at her face in the cracked mirror. There was a small cut on her cheek, a scratch that would fade in days. Her eyes looked different, older, emptied out and refilled with something harder than before. She picked up the diary from the counter. She took a lighter from her pocket and touched the flame to the corner of the blood-stained leather. The paper curled and blackened. The gold CV initials melted under the heat. She dropped the burning book into the metal trash can and watched the smoke rise toward the fixed vent. The secret was out. The weight was gone. The first of the police sirens wailed in the distance, then another, then another. Blue and red lights began to pulse against the motel room curtains. Emily knelt down and hugged Toby. It was a tight, real hug. His small arms wrapped around her neck. His breathing slowed. The sirens got louder. The door burst open. Police tactical teams flooded the room with flashlights and weapons. Officers in heavy armor and protective gear moved with practiced efficiency, their voices sharp and authoritative. Emily stood up slowly, her hands raised. She looked directly into the lens of a news camera in the parking lot, and she didn't look away. 3 days later, Emily sat in a clean, glass-walled office across from a lawyer in an expensive suit. He slid a small, thick envelope across the desk. It was from a safety deposit box. Triggered by her father's official death notification that morning, Emily opened the envelope. Inside was a key to a new car, a deed to a house in a different state, and a small note written in her father's careful handwriting. "I didn't kill her, Emily. I found her. The mayor did it. I just kept the book to keep you alive. Go be happy. Love, Dad." Emily stared at the note for a long time. She looked out the window and saw Toby playing with a ball in the station lobby below. She saw him laugh, actually laugh, and she understood something that had been locked away in confusion and fear. Her father wasn't the monster she thought. He was a different kind of prisoner, a man who'd made a choice to protect her, to stay silent, to keep a diary and event as insurance. Not redemption, just survival. She stood up. She walked out of that office and down the stairs. Toby ran to her, and she picked him up. Together, they walked toward the parking lot. Emily tossed the mayor's pistol into a safe disposal bin as they passed. The bright white car sat waiting in the lot, new and unmarked, a key in her pocket. She opened the driver's side door and settled Toby into the child's seat. She didn't strap him in yet. She just sat in the driver's seat for a moment, both hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing in the smell of new leather and new beginning. She turned the key. The engine started. She pulled out of the lot, watching the town of Asheville shrink in the rearview mirror. The mountains rose in the distance, dark and ancient, indifferent to the small dramas of human violence and human redemption that had unfolded in their shadow. Emily reached over and turned up the radio. An upbeat song was playing, something bright and fast and utterly detached from anything that had happened. She drove toward the state line. She drove toward the house with her father's name on the deed. She drove forward, her hands steady on the wheel, the road stretching ahead of her into darkness and possibility. She didn't look back.